NVIDIA was never supposed to rule the world for most of its history. NVIDIA made gaming chips, graphics cards, video game hardware, technology for gamers, nothing more. At least that's what most people thought. Wall Street thought it. Investors thought it. Even competitors thought it. Because when people looked at NVIDIA, they saw gaming. What they didn't see was infrastructure. The infrastructure of the future. The infrastructure of artificial intelligence. The infrastructure of modern computing. The infrastructure that would eventually power AI, robotics, autonomous vehicles, scientific research, large language models, national security, and perhaps the next industrial revolution itself. Today, NVIDIA is worth trillions of dollars. Its chips have become some of the most valuable products on Earth. Governments compete for access to them. Technology giants spend billions trying to secure them. Entire industries depend on them. And one man saw it coming long before almost anyone else. His name was Jensen Huang. And the story of NVIDIA is not really about graphics cards. It's about vision, patience, conviction, and what happens when one company spends decades preparing for a future nobody else can see. 3 engineers and a diner table. The year was 1993. The internet barely existed. Google did not exist. Facebook did not exist. YouTube did not exist. AI was still considered mostly academic research. Computers were primitive by modern standards. And inside a small diner in California, 3 engineers made a decision. They wanted to build a company. Not just any company. A company focused on graphics computing. One of those engineers was Jensen Huang. At the time, it sounded risky. The PC industry was chaotic. Competition was brutal. Many technology startups failed. Investors were skeptical. The company had no guarantee of survival. But Jensen believed something important. Computers would become visual, increasingly visual. People would demand more graphics, more realism, more processing power. And somebody would need to build the technology. That somebody became NVIDIA. At first, survival itself was uncertain. The company nearly died multiple times. Products failed. Cash ran low. Mistakes happened. At one point, Jensen later admitted that NVIDIA was only about 30 days from bankruptcy. 30 days. That's how close the company came to disappearing forever. But most billion-dollar companies don't look inevitable at the beginning. They look fragile, messy, risky, and uncertain. NVIDIA was no exception. The company that almost failed. People often imagine successful companies moving smoothly upward. Reality is much messier. Early NVIDIA faced enormous challenges. Competition was intense. Technology changed rapidly. Products became obsolete quickly. One mistake could destroy years of work. And NVIDIA made mistakes. Expensive mistakes. The company's first products were not revolutionary successes. Some failed commercially. Some disappointed expectations. But Jensen Huang developed a philosophy that would define NVIDIA forever. Endure short-term pain. Protect long-term vision. This sounds simple, but very few companies can actually do it. Because public markets reward quarters. Executives reward bonuses. Investors reward immediate growth. Vision often loses to short-term pressure. Yet NVIDIA repeatedly chose long-term positioning over short-term comfort. And that decision would eventually change everything. The gaming industry became their training ground. Video games may seem trivial. Entertainment. Fun. A hobby. But gaming created a unique challenge. Graphics processing. To render realistic worlds, computers needed enormous computational power. Traditional CPUs struggled. A new type of processor was needed, the graphics processing unit. The GPU. NVIDIA became obsessed with improving it. Generation after generation. Year after year. The company invested heavily. Not because GPUs were immediately worth trillions, because they believed graphics computing had much bigger implications. And this is where the story becomes fascinating. Because while competitors focused on selling chips, NVIDIA focused on building capability. They weren't just creating products, they were creating expertise. Expertise that would eventually become one of the most valuable assets in technology history. The decision that changed everything. In 2006, something happened. Most people barely noticed. Investors largely ignored it. The media didn't care. Yet it became one of the most important strategic decisions in technology history. NVIDIA launched CUDA. CUDA allowed developers to program GPUs for tasks beyond graphics. At first, this seemed niche, academic, technical, unimportant. But Jensen saw something others missed. GPUs weren't merely graphics processors. They were parallel computing machines. Machines capable of handling enormous numbers of calculations simultaneously. That capability mattered. And one day, it would matter tremendously. The problem was timing. The market wasn't ready. The opportunity wasn't obvious. There was little immediate reward. Many companies would have abandoned the effort. NVIDIA didn't. They kept investing, year after year, for nearly 2 decades, waiting for the future to arrive. Most people saw games. Jensen saw AI. This is where NVIDIA separates itself from ordinary companies. Most businesses optimize for today's market. Extraordinary businesses prepare for tomorrow's market. Long before ChatGPT, long before generative AI, long before AI became mainstream, Jensen Huang believed machine learning would become transformational. Not eventually, inevitably. He believed computers would learn, understand, generate, predict. And when that future arrived, massive computational power would be required. GPUs were perfectly positioned. The infrastructure was already being built. The software ecosystem was already developing. The expertise already existed. NVIDIA spent years preparing for a wave nobody else could see. Then, suddenly, the wave arrived. The AI explosion. In late 2022, the world changed. ChatGPT exploded. Millions of people experienced advanced AI for the first time. Investors panicked. Executives panicked. Governments panicked. Technology companies panicked. Because everyone suddenly realized the same thing. AI was no longer theoretical. It was real. And it required enormous computational power. Companies rushed to train models, build products, launch AI initiatives, scale infrastructure, and almost immediately, they discovered a problem. There weren't enough NVIDIA chips. The entire industry needed GPUs. NVIDIA already controlled the supply. Years of preparation suddenly transformed into overwhelming demand. The company wasn't reacting to the AI revolution. It had been preparing for it for decades. And that distinction created one of the greatest business advantages in modern history. The modern gold rush. History repeats itself, sometimes in surprising ways. During the California gold rush, many miners failed. Many lost money. Many never found gold. But the people selling picks and shovels often became rich. NVIDIA became the modern equivalent. During the AI boom, thousands of startups emerged. New applications, new models, new products, new promises. Some succeeded, many failed, but almost all of them needed NVIDIA. The company became the supplier of the AI economy, and suppliers often occupy powerful positions. Because when everyone needs your product, pricing power increases, influence increases, demand increases, leverage increases. NVIDIA wasn't competing in the AI race. They were selling the engines powering the race itself. Jensen Huang became the architect of the AI age. Great companies often reflect their founders. And NVIDIA reflects Jensen Huang. Relentless, patient, demanding, long-term oriented, obsessed with excellence. For decades, Jensen wore the same black leather jacket, became famous for marathon presentations, maintained intense focus on engineering, and resisted many short-term temptations. His leadership style wasn't built around quarterly headlines. It was built around decades. This perspective became a competitive advantage, because extraordinary outcomes often require extraordinary patience. Most people overestimate what can happen in 1 year and underestimate what can happen in 20. Jensen understood this deeply. NVIDIA became proof. The trillion-dollar lesson. People often ask, how did NVIDIA become worth trillions? The answer isn't AI. AI accelerated the outcome, but the foundation existed long before. The real answer is preparation. Preparation when nobody was watching. Investment before demand existed. Belief before consensus emerged. Patience before rewards appeared. Most people want immediate validation. NVIDIA spent decades operating without it. And eventually, the world caught up. The greatest opportunities rarely look obvious in the beginning. If they did, everyone would pursue them, and the rewards would disappear. NVIDIA's story is ultimately about seeing what others cannot see, then having the courage to commit before anyone agrees. The dark truth about technology revolutions: every technological revolution creates enormous wealth, but not always where people expect. The internet created wealth. Smartphones created wealth. Social media created wealth. Cloud computing created wealth. Artificial intelligence will create wealth. But often, the largest fortunes go to the infrastructure providers, the people building the foundations, not necessarily the applications, not necessarily the trends, not necessarily the headlines. Infrastructure quietly captures enormous value, and NVIDIA became one of the greatest infrastructure companies in history. Its chips power the systems. Its software powers the ecosystem. Its technology powers the revolution, which means NVIDIA is no longer simply a semiconductor company. It has become something much larger, a foundational layer of the AI economy. The real reason NVIDIA won. The real reason NVIDIA won is not superior hardware, not superior marketing, not superior timing. Those helped. But the deeper reason is vision. The ability to invest in a future that didn't yet exist. The willingness to endure uncertainty. The patience to build for decades. The discipline to ignore short-term distractions. Most companies react to the future. NVIDIA prepared for it. And when the future finally arrived, it arrived exactly where NVIDIA had been waiting. Because NVIDIA was never really selling graphics cards. It was building the infrastructure for intelligence itself. And in the age of artificial intelligence, that may become one of the most valuable businesses the world has ever seen. Subscribe to Wealth OS for more documentaries on wealth, power, media psychology, creator empires, AI, and the hidden systems shaping modern culture.